All right, it is 1 o'clock here in Boston, and time to get started with the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. My name is Dave McCormick. I'm Vice President of Products and Services here at Alpha Software. And today I'm pleased to welcome Sarah Mitchell, who is returning with us this week to go back over some more issues around styling of applications. We're also here to take your questions, which you can enter into the questions box of the GoToWebinar control panel. So let's get started. Let me take you off mute here, Sarah. Hi, Sarah, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can. Let me go ahead and make you the presenter. And there's your screen.
Cool. All right. So yeah, welcome back. If you joined us, I don't remember last time I talked about this. If you've joined us 3 weeks ago,
That's right.
this is a continuation of that first installment of many webinars on styling applications in Alpha Anywhere. So this is number 2. How many there will be, I don't know yet. We'll see. We'll know that when we get there. But in the meantime, let's get started. Today, I want to talk about style tweaks. Sorry, I just realized that I had an original title for this slide and then didn't write it down.
All right then.
And I might have gotten this out of order. So we're going to talk about style tweaks today, and within that we're going to talk about web themes. We're going to customize a project, and we're going to do a totally live demo. And the totally live demo has been practiced, so I know all of the pitfalls today. Before we get into that, though, we're going to go over a real quick review. Alpha Anywhere apps, what are they? They're a collection of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Your HTML is your content, like the words on the screen or tables. The JavaScript is the interaction. It's the window that pops up when you click a button, and the CSS is that look and feel. And what I mean by that, all of that is like this is a regular web page with no styling whatsoever. It's just your HTML. It doesn't have any JavaScript in it, so it's very basic. But you can see that that's really, really plain. But when you add something like CSS into the mix, you can transform your page into something like this, which the structure is identical. This content is identical to that content. The only difference is it's got some background, a few fonts, and some layout. So it's extremely powerful what you can do with a CSS application to your applications in Alpha Anywhere. Today, we're going to go over Sass. I had briefly mentioned this 3 weeks ago. We're going to get into it in a little more detail, and specifically we're going to talk about nesting and variables, which are 2 Sass concepts. And then we're also going to look at how you build up a style tweak to make a change to your whole project. So, Alpha Web Themes. Alpha Web Themes are pre-built themes for your web and mobile applications. They are designed for Alpha Anywhere. We have a few of them out of the box for you. Many of you may be familiar with the Alpha or the Alpha Dash and then color name like Rose or Blue 2 themes. Those are all web themes, and they can all be extended using CSS and Sass. So Sass stands for Syntactically Awesome Style Sheets, and what it does is it extends CSS from basic things like assigning a color property, a color value, to doing stuff like creating variables or nested rules, mix-ins, inline imports, functions, etc. By and large, you probably will never really dig in too deeply into what Sass does, but the power of Sass really, it makes it easier to both modify and manage your styles when you're doing things like swapping out colors or building up whole concepts like a container that has buttons in it, but you want it to appear like a card with this very specific style that's totally separate from everything else. So on the right side of the screen here, this is just some of the code I pulled out of the Alpha style, the Alpha web theme for Alpha Anywhere. And it demonstrates a few things. It demonstrates nesting. In CSS, you can't put this class selector inside of another one, it doesn't work. But in Sass, you can, and it lets you keep things grouped together. And then other stuff you see here are these $ words, which are variables, which allow you to define like a color or a pad size in one location. And with a single click, you can affect the entire style sheet and change everything throughout the project without having to go through and find every single instance of hashtag 333. So Sass has two really cool things. Just briefly touched on it. Nesting is one of them. If you remember the AB, the descendant combinator that we talked about 3 weeks ago, it's a rule that says anything that has a descendant, either a child or a grandchild within it, so like a bold tag instead of a paragraph, those would be assigned a rule. So anything that has the button class inside of something that has the panel header class will have this border 2 pixels solid black. It'll have a solid black border that's 2 pixels wide. This next rule, panel header, anything has the button icon, the background will be transparent. The third one here is panel header, and anything with the button hover will have the 2 pixel solid red border. Sass can let you take something like this on the left-hand side and rewrite it to look like on the right-hand side. And while in this instance, it doesn't look like you gain much, in the context of a larger file, you gain a lot, because what has happened here is I have taken all these rules that only apply to objects that have the button icon, or the button hover class inside of a panel header, and I've put them inside a grouping here that can be easily managed, maintained, and moved around. I know where everything is. It's all right here. I'm not searching up and down inside the file trying to make sure it captured everything, because I was able to group it together. So that is one of the real powers of nesting. It lets you manage your styles really nicely. And then the second one, variables. The format is a $ variable name. Variable name is whatever you want it to be. I do recommend you only use alphanumeric characters and avoid hyphen. I don't think you can use hyphens. You might be able to use underscores, but in general, it probably just letters and numbers. So it's that format followed by colon and then value. And value is any CSS value. It can actually be more than a single value, but I'm not going to get too much into that. So on the left here, we have that nested construction of the panel header from the previous slide. And what I've done here on the right is I've taken the 2px border width definition and I've put it into a variable called bwidth. And I've also taken the border style, which is solid, and I've put it inside a bstyle. And I've replaced that on the right with those variables. So border bwidth bstyle black, and then down in button hover, border bwidth bstyle red. If for some reason in the future I decide I don't want a 2 pixel border anymore, I can come in here and I can update the bwidth variable to be 1 pixel or 0, which case it would have no border. Or I could make it larger, and it would update the entire. It would update everything that used that variable. So instead of trying to remember that I had to go down and hunt every place that there was 2px, I can just change it in one location and not worry about it. And the same with this style. If I didn't want solid border, maybe a dash border, dotted border, no border, I can change it here as well, and it'll propagate through the entire theme. Have I lost anybody yet?
Well, they're not admitting it if they are lost. But by all means, do type in questions if you
yeah.
have them.
So just to make sure, checking with you guys, does everybody kind of understand that, what I'm talking about? What this does, these are Sass concepts. You can't do this with CSS, but it really helps manage and change your styles quickly.
Cool. Yeah, it looks like they're getting them.
All right, great. So all of this plays into modifying a system theme. Style tweaks override the system theme. They are stored in a special folder in your project, and they live with your project. All of the modern Sass themes, previously called version 4, I believe, but now we're calling them Sass themes, can be tweaked. So that would be your iOS 7, your Alpha Rose, your Android Dark. They all support this concept of tweaks. And we're just going to do the live demo because there's no other way I can really describe this unless I show it to you. So I'm going to turn that off. This is what we worked on last time with some, I think this one has a few modifications to it. So if you remember last time we figured out how to style the buttons in our app to be orange instead of blue, and we gave everything a background instead of it being white like the base Alpha theme does with the blue text and the white background and no indication it's a button. But something we did not get into was getting into the header area where we had some buttons and changing that. So this is the goal for today, is to get to the state, but we're not starting with this example. We're actually going to start with demo 2.
We do have one quick question, which is, can you use variables in regular CSS or only in Sass?
Only in Sass.
Only in Sass.
CSS doesn't have variables. Variables are strictly Sass.
Gotcha.
Yep. So this is pretty much where we left off last time. So we want to take this component and we want to get here. But we also, when we're done, we want our changes to apply to any new component. So right now, if I add a new component, it's not going to have these orange buttons because they've been defined inside of the component. So these are the classes I created. And over here in the control section, this is where they were assigned to the button class properties. So any reasonable person who wanted to change these buttons up here in the header would probably do what we did here, go down here and take these button classes and assign them above. So we're going to start there. And just so you guys are familiar with this, I'm going to select this button, I'm going to click on the button class property, and I'm going to use the paste properties tool so that I can change the button class property for all of these controls at the same time. So click set properties. I'm going to select button class hover, do it again for all 4 of those. Button class pressed, and button class disabled, set properties. So if you go now and we go look here, you'll see that they've all got the classes that we copied in. And if we live preview it, we would expect that these buttons in the header are orange. But they're not. And the reason they're not is because there are more specific rules in the Alpha theme for content within a panel header that win in terms of specificity. They're more specific. They're not a general button. They're specifically a button in a header. So how would we even begin to figure out what they are? Well, one way you could do that is to go and look at the Alpha theme. And my recommendation is to actually get a local copy and start from the beginning. So from the Web Projects control panel, you would go into More and open Web Style Builder. And had you not previously already created a copy, you would select Alpha. You would click OK. You would give it a name, and you would open the style. I'm going to see if this will work. It probably won't because I have a tweak file already in my project, but it's empty. But I did do that earlier, so you'll have to trust me on this. But if you get a copy of it, you can come in here and you can start to inspect things. You can look at panel card base, panel card header. So these buttons are all inside of a panel header inside of a panel card. Oops. So if we go over here and we find panel card, we see that it has a header. You go over to the code part. If you come in here and you select panel card and the base theme, you'll see here this header class name, panel header, is the one assigned here. So this starts to sort of give you an idea. If you then take that class and you search for it, you'll find things like the basic assignment, which there's your color in your background. Color is the text color and the background is the background, but it's not the buttons. So we need to hunt down those buttons and figure out what's going on. Edit overrides. That's not what we want. Button group overrides. Getting closer. Button. Panel header. Button. There's all that information. This is what's overriding it. This is what's winning. So we need to create our own override that basically mirrors this model but has our settings in it. So we'll go back here and we'll take a look again. At our live preview, and we'll look at it and we'll compare it to what we want. So we know that we want the buttons to be orange, and we know we want to get rid of the shadow, but we also know that we want the background to be white. And this background's already the wrong color. Some of the controls that we ship in Alpha Anywhere within the styles, they have a thing called a subtheme. And the panel card has several subthemes, one called Alt, where the background is slightly lighter, and one called Contrast, where the background is completely white. So if you're back here looking at that theme, you would see, here's our panel card. We were looking at base, but down here, here's Contrast, and it's got that white background that we want. So instead of trying to go through all the work of changing the background and the text on the panel card base, we're just going to start with Contrast. So we're going to come here, we're going to select our panel card, we're going to go to the subtheme, click the ... button, and we're going to select Contrast. And fair warning, I'm running in a pre-release. You would usually see a preview similar to the one we were looking at in the web theme builder here, but for whatever reason in today's build, there are no previews for this specific subtheme. So we're just going to roll with it and hope that we pick the right one and then preview it. So we've got our white background, which is what we want. We still don't have our buttons yet, but that's the next step. So we're going to go back here and we're going to track down. We're going to go take a look at Contrast to see what that header name is. So here we see that panel header button. I bet you anything that Contrast has something similar. And it does, PanelHeaderContrast. That's the class name. So we're gonna look here, look at this, and just kind of assume that if we create a nested rule with PanelHeaderContrast with all of our button properties in it, it will probably work. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take this class name, we're going to copy it, Control-C copy. Go back here, go to the Properties tab in our component, go down to the CSS SVG and the local CSS definitions where all of our button orange themes are defined. We're going to hit enter, and type period, Control-V, PanelHeaderContrast, open curly brace, enter, closing curly brace. And then we're going to take all of this stuff up here. This is all of our orange button definition. we're going to copy it, and we're just going to paste it here identically, and then click OK. And then live preview. And now we're closer. In fact, we're pretty close. There's a few more things we want to do. We want to change the height somehow and get a shadow, and then also address this issue of spacing on the outside edge. You'll notice here that these buttons are snugged up way up on the inside, whereas our goal, there's a little bit of space there. So the best way to figure out what you need to do to change these things once you've figured out where they need to live, is to go back to design, go to the controls tab, pick one of the buttons, and start changing its inline style. This is probably the easiest way to figure out what you want, figure out how to get what you want. The inline style comes with the style editor, which provides a number of properties for you. Fair warning, not everything is in here, but most of what you need is. And it's got some really cool features across the top that also let you filter. So what we're going to address first is that button height. So we're going to mouse over this and see which one might be the closest filter. Filter for visual attributes. That sounds pretty similar. So nope, that's not quite right. How about this one right next to it? Box model. Minimize border. Here we are, padding. So I know that I want to change the padding on this button, but I didn't know that that space around the button was what I wanted to change before I had fiddled with it for a bit. So before I apply any changes here, we're going to go back into working preview. And I'm going to open the Chrome Debugger, which if you don't see Chrome Debugger down here, click on the Internet Explorer link and then select Chrome and click OK. And that will put the working preview in Chrome mode. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller so it fits. And then I'm going to click on this icon right here. It looks like a box with an arrow. And then I'm going to go click on my button. And then click on Open Chrome Debugger again to bring it back to the foreground. So the Chrome Debugger has some cool layout tools. The computed tells you the properties of this object, and you'll see here it's when you mouse over each part, it tells you what it highlights it on the left. So there's the inside, I assume that's the content, and then the outside has this thing called padding. That's the padding property. And the top and the bottom have a value of 9, but I don't really like that, so I would like to change that. So I'm going to go back over here to style, and this top one here, this element style, and you'll know you have the right one because it'll be highlighting the object that you want to modify on the left. If you click on that and just hit the tab button until it gives you a new option, you can start playing with it. So I'll type P for that padding, and I've got a few options here. Padding top. Let's try making that smaller. So let's make it 0, which is too small. So we'll back it up and we'll make it like 3 pixels, which is that's pretty close to what I want actually. So we have our padding top, and then we'll look at padding bottom just to see if that's the other size that we want to change. Hit the tab key again, type in 3px. So that looks pretty close to what I want. In fact, it might be exactly what I want. It looks pretty similar. So we're gonna take that, and so what you can do is you can actually like highlight that, and you can hit Control-C to copy it. Go back into your designer, open up your inline style editor, and either filter and go in here and enter in 3 pixels for the top, and 3 pixels for the bottom. Or you can click on code and paste it. So you can edit them directly here if you kind of know what you already want. Or you can fiddle around with a tool like the debugger in Chrome and copy the properties out of there. Or if you've been given CSS from a designer, you can just come in here and paste it directly into the controls to verify that that's actually what you want. So we're gonna paste that in here, and we're just gonna preview it again to make sure that's the change that we wanted. Which it is. And then what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take it, we're gonna copy it out of here, or cut it, cancel, go to properties, go to the local CSS definitions, find that button, that panel header contrast that we added, and we're just gonna put it inside of button orange here to see if that's where we need to put that, and then live preview. So now all of our buttons look correct. So let's look at that white space thing. Let's look at that next. One way to address that is to change your panel header. Every panel header object has a container style property you can edit directly. We'll go to the properties tab. We'll find that we'll filter on the box model attributes, minimize border. We'll find padding. And let's just change all the padding, and let's make it 10 pixels to kind of push things away from the edge. Click OK. And go over to live preview or working preview, either or. Please wait. It's loading. There we go. So that looks better. I don't like how much space is on the bottom though. I would prefer that it was tighter. Even knowing this is what our goal is. Let's go back and let's just change the requirement. Filter on the box model. Go down to padding. We're gonna Control X to copy that out, and we're gonna paste it in the top and on the left and on the right. That doesn't really matter much. And we're gonna set bottom to 0 and see if that looks okay. Oops, let's do working preview. It's a little faster. So that looks better. It feels balanced. My buttons are orange. They do everything that these ones do. Oh, but these ones aren't orange. That's no good. How are we going to fix that? We'll get to that next. So I like that. I like that container style. I would like that to just be general. I would like all of my panel headers to have that padding if they're in contrast mode. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do the same thing we did last time. I'm coming here. I'm going to cut, Control X, copy it out, click OK. Go to Properties, go find my local CSS definitions, and go down and find Panel Header Contrast, and then add some blank space after it. And I'm just going to paste it directly into here, right after Panel Header Contrast. Panel Header Contrast is the class name that was given to that panel header when I gave it the contrast subtheme. So if I want to generally apply padding to all of the all of the panel headers in my project here and want them all have the same padding, I need to put it there, which you'll see here now. Not only am I defining the properties of that particular subtheme, but I also have all of those other button properties that I've added to it as well. So this is, as we're doing, we're building up these little changes, and they apply generally throughout the project, or throughout this component, I should say, because they're only local to the component right now. But this is how you approach getting to that style that you want. You make a few changes locally in those controls by editing those, the style property, either the container style. In the case of the buttons, you can edit the button inline style. Oh, we didn't delete that one. That should be blank because these other ones are blank. But images and buttons have inline styles, editor controls, and so on and so forth. So starting locally to tweak it to figure out what you want, and then pushing it up higher and higher as you go. So you would take it from the style and maybe you'd put it inside of a class name, which you could then assign, like we did with our button orange classes. And then taking that a step further and pushing it up higher where it changes the whole theme, which is what I want to talk about next. But before we do that, I would like to resolve the issue of there's a drop shadow here. How did we create that? There is no editor for shadow, unfortunately, but there is a really cool tool online called the HTML CheatSheet.com/CSS. And
but isn't that cheating?
It is totally cheating.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to put that in the chat window for you guys. And this is just a big, huge, hard to look at, but it's got everything in it. And one of the things it has in it is box shadow. It's that shadow around the object. It's got checkboxes. You can drag this around to figure out how to align it.
Cool.
And
then
it just updates
the CSS underneath, and you just grab it.
CSS for you down here, which you could then copy. So I'm going to back off opacity. Opacity is how transparent it is. Maybe 0.5. Maybe I don't want this too offset.
Right, you're thinking about where the lighting's coming from here.
Yeah, so it's like how far down, how far right is the shadow. It's easier to see if you take the spread and the blur and you set it to something ridiculously small, like 0. So then you can see like, oh, I want it like right there. That looks kind of cool, but I want it a little bit like subtle. And then and you can change the color here too to all sorts of colors. I happen to have an affinity for 33333. And then you come down here and you just highlight it and you copy it and you go back and you find your alpha theme, your button orange. So the padding works. So logically, if we paste in our box shadow stuff in here, that will apply too.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So we do have a question, and that is, if they wanted to change the space between those buttons, would that just be a matter of changing the padding or the margin or something like that?
Well, let's find out.
All right.
Let's figure, how would we change that? Well, and it's a great question because button spacing behaves differently in different contexts. If you have buttons in a control bar, it's a little more tricky, and we can do a quick demo of that later. But we'll use the Chrome Debugger. We'll take that select an element button thing. We'll click on our button, go back in here, and we'll just take a look at style here, and like the spacing here on the side is, it's probably margin, but it could be something else. So I would come in here and I would look for a margin, and I see buttons have a margin set to 0, and you can click this checkbox to see if it would change things, but that doesn't really do anything.
What if you increase the size though from 0 to something else?
So yeah, so you could come in here and there's this cool thing. You can take your arrow keys and you can just press the up button or the
Oh, look
down
at that.
button,
Very cool.
and you'll see that I'm changing it for everything. And this is actually a button in the the base theme,
Mhm.
where that's defined. But that's like changing the whole thing, and I don't necessarily want to change it down here. So at this point, not seeing anything else that looks like a margin, I would start to wonder, like, is there something after this? So if we go back to the design and just take a moment to look at our control, notice that at the top here, we have this thing called a break, and there's no break. But there's a horizontal spacer property. So you couldn't come in here if you wanted the horizontal space between them to be greater. You could change it here.
I see.
Yep, that's one place to change it. And actually, they might be spaced at 10 pixels already, which would not be very helpful of a demo. Oh, well, they're not. So there you see it. That one's slightly wider now. But the other way you can do it is on the button itself. Go to the inline style class, go to the property,
Mhm.
find the margin, find that right, and give it, we'll make it ridiculous, 20 pixels. So in theory, this should also work. But sometimes it doesn't, and then you get confused. So that worked. That made it space it as well. So if that was something you wanted all of these buttons that were inside the header to have, you would take it here. You could cut it, go back to your properties, open up your CSS local definition, find your panel header contrast button definition, and paste it. Now, sometimes the spacing around an object in your project is not it's not necessarily the margin on the component control thing itself. Sometimes it's something else. And control bars, so there's a nice spaced out. So the control bars behave a little differently if they have buttons in them. But that's how you could do it to increase the space between them. So the last thing assuming there's no other questions about that, what I want to do next is take all of this stuff and I want to put it into a style tweak that modifies the whole project. I want to change all those buttons. I don't want to just have this button orange thing that I have to apply. I just want to generally change every button, that button base, basically, to use these orange colors.
Very cool. Hey, can we go back to the debugger for a moment? We have a debugger question, the Chrome Debugger.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, when we're looking at it, some of those properties had strike through. Well,
Yes.
let's take a look at it. And could you kind of walk us through what that meaning of that?
So if it's struck through, if there's a line
Yeah.
through it, it means there's another rule that is more specific that's overriding it.
Overriding that one. Okay.
Yeah. So like, or it's an invalid rule.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So WebKit box shadow is being overwritten by box shadow. That's why there's a line through this one. It doesn't apply in this particular browser. But if you look down here at like panel header contrast, button orange, this is all being overwritten by this rule up here.
Oh, I got you. Sure.
And I don't fully understand why it's listed twice.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah.
But typically a strike through means this rule isn't applied because for some reason. And it may be that it's invalid or it may be that it's being overruled by.
Yeah, it's more specific. So like, and I can show you an example of what that means. So we'll take color here and we'll take that check marks and we'll uncheck it and we'll have a line here, but now there's no line here. So let's uncheck it again and see what happens. Now it's black. Why is it black? Where is that color coming from? If you scroll down further, here's color. If you uncheck that, it's white again. Well, it's being overwritten here by our button orange class. And if you uncheck that, button orange again, uncheck that. Now it's that blue color, which came from our our base theme, the alpha style sheet, that's the blue color for buttons.
Mhm.
So that's how that applies. It's helpful to, if you've got like, oh, I've got a color, but it's like got a line through it and it's not applying. Well, what is applying to it? You can kind of check on things until you find it.
I see.
Yeah. Oops. Yeah.
I see. It becomes unstructured once you've killed the other styles that were conflicting. Gotcha.
Yep.
All right.
Apply it. If it's got a check mark next to it, it applies.
So someone is asking, all right, this is cool, but has Alpha ever thought about doing a WYSIWYG functionality? And we have thought about it several times, but not in a while. So maybe it's time to come back and revisit it now that we have this cool style builder. There might be some other things that we can do. Because I mean, the whole notion, which is what they suggest here in this comment, of being able to click on a button and then just resize it, right? Like clicking and dragging it would be really cool. And then have it just say, okay,
cool.
this is the new number of pixels, right?
Yeah, that would be cool. And that is definitely something that we've talked about.
Yep, and that's going to be recorded as feedback. So the more you ask for these sorts of things, the more likely we are to put them in. So thank you very much for that.
Unfortunately, this is where we're at right now. And if you
Yeah.
want to change things now, this is where you have to work, what you have to work within. So, but that's a great suggestion. I would love it to be more WYSIWYG, more interactive cheat sheet, less.
Yes, less playing around with code and guessing.
Playing around with code. So
Sure.
let's do one more thing. Let's push this up into a style tweak. And instead of calling button orange, we're going to rename everything that override the base classes. So I'm going to start by cutting all of the code out of my CSS editor in the UX. I'm going to save the changes, and I'm going to scroll up, and I'm going to find this style subtheme and CSS tweaks property. I'm going to open that, go to the CSS tab, and hit paste, and then click OK. Then I'm going to click on Edit in Style Builder and open that up and go over to the Style Builder. So this is the Style Builder if you've opened a style tweak. It will say the style name at the top. It'll say the word tweak next to it. There will be no parts. The parts will be empty unless you've already added your own subthemes. But if you go to the Adjust tab, it will have everything from the base style in there in terms of the objects. So there's our grid.
Oh, I see. The Adjust tab.
Panel card. Yep. There, interestingly, there's our panel card contrast, and it's already got that wonderful padding that we added earlier just by pasting that stuff in. But did it get our buttons? Way down here somewhere is button, and it did not. We want this button, specifically button base, to look like those orange buttons. So how would you do that? Well, you need to figure out what button base is, and the easiest way to do that right now is to come in here and find button here, click to add under the select part. Select the base theme. Oh, do not select a different one though. Select button. Select the base theme. We're just gonna call this one, we're gonna call it base copy, just so that we know it's a copy. Because we're not gonna do anything with this. We just want to know what the class names assigned to the button base were. And this is what they are. It's button, button hover, button pressed, and button disabled. So that is one use of this copy, is to figure out what those classes are. The other use here is we've got a preview now of that, and this is identical to the base theme. So any changes we make to these classes will be reflected here. So we can start by taking a look at button orange, and that's really our button class in the grand scheme of things. So if we delete the word orange out of all this stuff, we can start to see how it would apply to the base theme. This is hover. Here's button pressed. That's got that highlight. Disabled, we'll back that off. Remove orange out of there. We'll just go down the line. Delete it from icon. You won't see the preview on icon here, unfortunately, because we don't have any icon in here. But we can assume that deleting orange out of here will have the effects on our icons that we want.
We'll trust you.
Trust me,
Yeah.
I'm an expert. So that's our buttons. And one way to figure out if you were successful or not is to go back to your project. You find that control where you'd assigned, when we'll do new record because we know that's not really disabled ever. And we're just going to come in here and we're just going to delete all the class names that we assigned to that button class, button, hover, and pressed. Save it and do a live preview or working preview. And indeed, it's orange.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. So we're gonna remove all the class names from everything. Fun, if you hold down the control key, you can select multiple controls in this window. So just to recap, I selected my button class. I clicked on the paste multiple properties tool and I selected what I wanted holding down the control key, and then I click set properties. And then I'm gonna do that for hover. Set properties. The nice thing is that it remembers what you selected.
Mm-hmm.
Set properties. So this will clear everything out. Go to working preview. And I'm going to leave working preview open. So this is where we're at. These are what I want, but we're back to that problem in the header, and that was because we did not finish updating. Oop, is that the one I was working on? No, I was working on this one. I'm going to close this one. No, there we go. We haven't made those changes to the panel header contrast section yet. So I'm going to show you a really cool feature about the web theme builder. There's this thing up here. It says wrapper class none. You probably can't read that because it's very tiny. But if you click on that, you can enter a class name here that will be applied to the preview. It doesn't change the style, but it changes the preview. And I would like to preview the panel header contrast buttons while I'm editing them. And while you could edit things here and swap back and forth between here and the component you're working on, it's easier to just apply the class name here to preview it here. So now I have a preview of my buttons and a panel header by adding a wrapper class. You could also try compact, which if you use the compact theme, this would show you what buttons in a compact theme would look like. You can combine these, you can, I think, but I'm not going to test that because I haven't tried it yet. So we'll not make that claim. But we're going to look at that panel header contrast and the preview, and we're going to do here what we did before. We're going to delete that word orange from things, and you're starting to see how it comes together. We'll take it off of the hover. Pressed. Disabled. You may notice that things aren't actually really changing much for those middle two. And we'll have to investigate why. Disabled orange. Save it. And if I go back to my demo, which I left open in working preview, I can click reload page. And it will reload this with those styles. So that's not the behavior I want. I don't want that blue text when I mouse over it.
Right.
I want it to look like a darker with the white. Why is it doing that? Well, the only way to really figure that out right now is to go and look for your panel contrast header in the original theme. And we're going to go look at how that was built up. So I think this one. So this is the button. And you'll see you have some stuff. You have this icon is inside button, which is fine. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for something that answers the question, why is there a border when we hover over the icon? Let's see if we can find it. Here's button pressed. Here, there's a thing, it's called button pressed after. And it has a border bottom that's solid. So we had mentioned what these guys are briefly 3 weeks ago. There are special content areas around an item inside a HTML page, the content area after the object and before it, and you can actually insert stuff in here. For example, a border. So I don't want a border when the button is pressed or when you're hovering on it. So I'm just gonna select this stuff here. I'm gonna copy it. We're gonna go back over to our style tweak here. And I think before button disabled, it doesn't matter, but it is nice to keep things close together that are related. I'm gonna paste that here and do open curly brace and a close curly brace. Hit enter. I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna say border none. And click out of it and see if that worked. So those lines are gone, but the text is still wrong. The color is still wrong. Well, there was something else going on that we didn't notice, and that was the definition here. Notice there's no space between button and button hover, or that it's preceded by button. This is a special selector. It says anything that has the button and button hover class has these properties. So just out of curiosity, we're going to go back and we're going to say, well, what happens if I add dot button to my button hover? Will that work? And the answer is yes, it will. So if I come in here and add that dot button to these two, the button hover and the button pressed, I've now got all the rules that I needed here, overriding the style as I want. And if we go back to our demo and reload the page again, whoop, you know what we also have to do? We have to save our style sheet. Very helpful. So that's close. The icon, I don't know if you guys can see it, it's still turning blue. So maybe there was something to nesting that icon definition inside of a button. Mm-hmm. So we could actually take that and move it up. We'll just copy it and put it inside button. I think that was the last thing that we needed to do to get this. Nope, not reload. Oh, I'm gonna close that. Reload the page. I'm still missing something on. Oh, I don't want to put icon inside of the button. I want to put it inside the button hover. And then save it. There we go.
Yeah, right.
Now it's not blue anymore. So that's in our theme. If we go back to adjust and we scroll through this, we will see everywhere that those changes will be applied. Mm-hmm. Oh, so there's a place where it'll happen in window base. And, oh, hold on. If you apply a wrapper class, you have to remember to take it off if you want to just look at the style sheet in general.
Gotcha. Right.
Okay, this will make more sense now.
Yeah.
So there's the button. Mm-hmm. And there's our button base. Now confirm, deny, etc. These guys all have extra classes that you would have to address. And honestly, if the thing you wanted to do was to make everything in your theme orange, I would not recommend doing it on a class by class basis. I would recommend that you come in here and you find the accent and the alternate accent color variables and you change them to be your orange color. So Bandeck orange, and that will broadly apply across the board. Same with your accent color. Pick a different orange. Well, let's make it red or something. So now we've got red and orange instead of that blue color, and that's throughout. So if color is your game, is what you need to change. Keep it simple. Just change the colors in the theme. But when you get into something more specific, like adjusting the buttons in a panel header to have this button look with the shadow as opposed to text with the line that appears when you hover over it. That's where you're gonna come in here, and those changes will be more effective. So, do I have any questions?
Excellent. I think we've run. Hang on. Can you? I guess someone wants that CSS. Want to just paste that into the?
Yeah. In fact, I will paste in the CSS from. I wonder if I can just send over this component.
Ooh. All right.
Let's see. Let's see if that was demo 1.
Let's see what chat lets you actually send over or not. I don't know if it does. Oh, there's a little.
Oh, it is inferior.
It doesn't. Yeah.
It's inferior. So yeah. So my demo 1 control has all of that.
So if you want to copy the code, just send an email over to guides@alphasoftware.com. Happy to set you up with it.
Yeah, send a guide, because I'm gonna.
So Sarah,
it up a little bit.
What I usually do to Dion like 3 minutes before we end is start some completely new subject to make you completely switch gears. But it is a pretty good question. It was one that I thought you might have a couple good ideas to.
Okay.
This person is interested in building a Sass application, and they were wondering what are some of the guidelines to follow. And the thing I thought that immediately jumped to mind was our new ability, I guess, what is it, within the connection string, to make sure that data does not commingle by building an argument into it or something like that, but you know more than I do.
Yes. New build.
Okay.
So we have this thing called a multi-tenant connection string. And
which is what you want for a Sass application.
And what it does is it filters every query based on a user or a company or however you choose to identify each account within the system. It filters the whole database, like every query gets filtered on that. So you would come in here and you'd set up what that name of that owner variable is if you have a database in the back end. The special session variable name where that tenant ID is stored, and the type, and that will get you a lot of the way there. This first property here is the connection string to the database itself that stores the actual data. So this is like an intermediate thing. So this is one great way to do software as a service. It's got a database backend. So we have this one. And if you do not like the way that we've built this multi-tenant connection string, like if it's just not doing enough for you, you can create your own using a custom connection. And we actually have a multi-tenant driver already made that you can create. Just click on it. This is, I think it is literally the one that we use for the multi-tenant driver, its connection type itself. But this gives you a lot more control. You can come in here and customize that however you want. If you've got more data besides the tenant ID, maybe you've got tenant ID and
group
user
ID or whatever,
group or
something weird like that.
Yeah, if you've got more data there, or if you want to only specifically filter some things, then when you come in here and you could tweak the query to say, okay, if it's anything against this table, then do X, but if it's on this other table, then don't apply this search. Don't include that tenant ID in the where clause. You can come in here and change that. So
that's very good. So that gets over the problem that people often run into, where they have one database for all their clients and they don't want their data to commingle. It's terrible. You don't want one person to accidentally see the data of another person because you made a programming error. This stops you from making those programming errors because it's just not going to show you the data unless you have the right variable filled in.
It'll help stop making those programming errors.
Well, it'll stop. You'll get to make other ones.
Eliminate them.
You get to make new ones.
You still want to test your product.
Well, yeah, test it. But I mean, it does make it a lot more foolproof. So
no, it does.
That was the point behind it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and then suppose in tandem with that too, we also have cancel, because I would imagine it's more than just filtering data, but we also have it's not here. It's in the project settings, project properties, and the audit table. So you could keep track of what changes are being made and set up an audit table for your Sass project. You could use the property here, or we have a custom connection string that is called an audit connection that we've pre-configured with some default settings that might be useful. But you can take that and basically string them together. You could audit all your interactions into that database by running a tenant, by somehow combining the two. I actually don't know how you would do that off the top of my head, but I know you can. Great. So that's probably another thing you'd want to also include, is just to know when people are making changes.
That sounds great. Hey, Sarah, thank you very much. We have run out of time, actually by a minute and a half ago. And I want to thank everyone who attended today and asked questions. If we didn't get to your question or you have other ones, please send an email to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, @alphasoftware.com. Deanne will be back next week, answer your questions as well, and to do another demo. So hope to see you then. Take care and goodbye.